Dive-In.
Bienvenidos a Dive-In.
Witajcie na festiwalu Dive-In.
Welcome to the Dive-In Festival.
Willkommen zu Dive-In.
Bienvenidos a Dive-In.
Welcome to Dive-In.
Mabuhay sa Dive-In Kapistahan.
Üdvözlünk a Dive-In Fesztiválon.
Добро пожаловать на фестиваль Dive-In.
ברוכים הבאים. בואו לצלול איתנו.
Dive-In উৎসবে আপনাদের সকলকে জানাই সাদর আমন্ত্রণ।
Dive-In'e yokoso.
Benvenuti al Dive-In Festival.
Dive-In Festivali'ne hoş geldiniz.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. I'm Noelle Kadaspati.
And I'm Day Bishop from Willis Towers Watson.
As co-champions for Dive-In here in the Americas, along with Margaret Ressi-Milken from the Jacobson Group, we would like to extend a very warm welcome to you all. This week, you are joining more than 20,000 industry colleagues around the world that have registered for Dive-In events in more than 30 countries. We'd like to thank all of our global and local sponsors, partners, and the more than 500 volunteers who have worked tirelessly the past several months to produce our first ever completely virtual Dive-In Festival.
And we'd especially like to thank our local Dive-In team leaders here in Minneapolis, Stacy Greenfield, Wes Griffiths, and Jim McMahon. Stacy reached out to me after the Dive-In Festival last year, determined to bring Minneapolis into the Dive-In Festival for 2020 and to highlight neurodiversity. I want to thank all of you for making this happen, and we applaud your leadership and your commitment to inclusion, diversity, and equity. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Live captioning for this session is available at the bottom of your screen. And on the right-hand side, you can see the text chat window, so you can submit questions at any time during the presentation there. And now let's get started with our welcome from Jim, Stacy, and Ashley. Lillian, can you please start the video?
Good morning, and welcome to our Disability Inclusion session as part of the 2020 Dive-In Festival. We've entitled this Radical Rapid Response to the New Normal. I'm Jim McMahon with Travelers, and I lead our inclusive hiring efforts. And joining me for the opening discussion is Stacy Greenfield, Inclusion and Diversity Analyst with Willis Towers Watson, and Ashley Oolman, a Diversity and Inclusion Consultant with LifeWorks. LifeWorks is a nonprofit that works with 2,900 individuals with disabilities and their families, and it was actually founded by families who recognize the importance of advocacy and removing barriers for people with disabilities to be a part of our community. So how did we land on this subject as the Twin Cities' first contribution to the Dive-In Festival? Well, last year, Stacy and Ashley and I, we met at the Autism Roundtable, which was hosted by Microsoft. Now, it's kind of radical that two insurance firms would be at a conference like this. And that combined with COVID-19 this year, we are rapidly responding to so many different environmental factors that are changing some of our employment norms that we got together, we discussed hosting a session, engaged some other local partners, and we settled on our topic. So we'd like to thank our local partners, which include Willis Towers Watson, Travelers, LifeWorks, the State of Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, and our industry partners, which include RIMS, the Casualty Actuarial Society, the Society of Actuaries, and Gamma Iota Sigma St. Thomas University's chapter. So let's define disability a little bit. Let's scope this out some. So Ashley, you're our resident expert. Can you just give us an understanding of what's a disability? How prevalent is this in the adult population out in the world?
Absolutely. So first up,
there are a lot of different definitions of disability. So there are legal definitions, there are medical definitions, of course, there are self-identified definitions as well. On top of that, there are many different types of disabilities as well. The CDC breaks them down in a number of different categories. Some examples of that are physical disabilities, mental health, learning, and sensory. Something else that's important to note is that when it comes to disabilities and employment, people without disabilities are 2 times as likely to have a college degree, 2 times as likely to be employed, but they are also, people with disabilities are 2 times as likely to live below the poverty line, and they make on average $28,000 less per year. One last stat that I can share with you, Jim, is that according to the CDC, 26% of Americans, or roughly 1 in 4, have a disability. So that's an estimated 61 million people with disabilities in the United States.
So that's just a fascinating statistics, and our actuaries are just thrilled that you're throwing some numbers out at them right now. So, but it just really, it's so prevalent when you think about how to be inclusive. And from my perspective, I'm at the front end of the funnel from an employment perspective, but it's onboarding, it's training, it's managing, it's assimilating into our various corporate cultures. So do you see issues and problems with some of the companies that you work with out, in the Minnesota community? How big of a challenge is this?
That's a really great question. I mean, like a lot of different things when it comes to workplace belonging or workplace culture, there are a lot of different lead measures that companies can work on to make a real impact. But when it comes to inclusion, and more specifically disability inclusion, it's really all about changing our mindset. One of the biggest barriers that is reported by people with disabilities is bias and people's perspectives, not necessarily a person's limitations or their perceived limitations. Jim, as you know, I myself identify as a neurodivergent person. I have ADHD, and I've seen in my own professional life the ways in which when someone knows that I have ADHD, or if they don't know that I have ADHD, the perceptions of what I might be capable of or what I might be able to contribute or not can be different, even just based on the knowledge of that. The way that my mind works is different.
Thanks for sharing that. The changing perceptions is really interesting. So again, I'm in talent acquisition and interviewing, and I've often asked myself, and this may sound crazy, but if I had the opportunity to interview Albert Einstein, would I recommend him to hire? Now, many people may not realize that Einstein had learning disabilities. He didn't speak until age 3. Rarely communicated until age 7. He went to a special school for visual learners, and actually one of his school teachers had kind of labeled him a total failure. This kid is never going to amount to anything. So, again, if we were interviewing Einstein in any of our organizations, and we have 600 people, with us in our virtual audience today. So I'd ask all of you, think about what your reaction would be, what your perception would be if you interviewed Einstein. And so from my thought process, it would be, interview debrief thought would be, he wore a brown suit. Who wears a brown suit to an interview? And the hair, when was the last time that hair saw a comb, right? I should be so lucky. But accent, communication, was really difficult to understand what he was saying. I asked for examples of him being a team player, typical behavioral interview type questions. And, he couldn't give me great answers there. And, if we asked him about, tell us about a significant accomplishment. And, he probably would rattle off something like, well, E equals MC squared. And, from our industry perspective, we might be there, E equals MC squared. Well, is that like, how do you determine rate for somebody that owns 2 motorcycles? I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of a crazy thought, but I'd ask everyone out there, think back about some of your interviews. And have you ever just thought, there's something about them? and that you can't really put your finger on it. It may not be job related. So I'll give you one more quick example. Dan Aykroyd, so I'm dating myself. You know, Dan Aykroyd, the Blues Brothers, the original Ghostbusters movie. So you may not know it, but Aykroyd wrote Ghostbusters, and he actually suffers from Tourette's and Asperger's, and Ghostbusters is really a manifestation of his disability. He is absolutely obsessed with ghosts throughout his childhood, and a lot of the idiosyncrasies of the character are really Aykroyd himself. So, I mean, he's a comic genius. Einstein is a genius, but would we hire them? And so from my perspective in employment, and everybody is a genius at something. We just have to figure out what it is. And sometimes the individuals, you know, they don't get an opportunity to prove themselves. They don't get the opportunity to really reach their potential. And is it because we put hurdles in front of them? You know, instead of the handicap assist button on the front door of employment, are we putting speed bumps in the way? Are we putting you know, an obstacle course in the way? I'm not sure, but you know, our industry, with your statistics, we employ about 2.8 million people in the insurance industry. So if we have 25% of the adults have disabilities, then perhaps 700,000 people in our industry are disabled. I'm not sure we really have representative numbers like that, and obviously not everyone discloses, but I don't know, you know, we're a stable industry, but we're also a really difficult industry to recruit for. I mean, I don't know about you, but I never grew up going to school and thinking, I'm going to work for an insurance company, right? We're an accidental career. So we have to convince people to come into our industry. Now, the actuaries, underwriters, obviously, they knew they wanted to come into our industry. If you're a student in Gamma, the risk management, you want to come into our industry. But for the most part, we really have to convince people, and yet, you know, we have a wide variety of roles. We have difficulty recruiting for some of these roles, and we have a highly educated, systematically unemployed or underemployed population out there. You know, with COVID-19, we just got so much more acceptance of remote. We're doing this webinar remotely, and I'm just thinking that this is a great opportunity for us to be opening up doors for the disabled community that they've been knocking on for years. And so I don't know that we've got all the answers today. I'm not sure we even have all the questions, but at the end of our session, we're going to open it up for audience questions. So we're really looking forward to that dialogue. But Stacy, if can you introduce yourself, give us a little background perspective on the industry, and perhaps, you know, how are we going to structure today's conversation?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jim. I really appreciate a lot of the remarks that you shared about the recruitment process and where there are some hurdles or barriers that have been created, especially for the disability community. And so, you know, I'm with Willis Towers Watson. I'm part of the inclusion and diversity team there, and you know, we talk about this conversation a lot. And you know, I think from a dive-in perspective, we've made a lot of really good progress in the IND space. You know, a number of our companies here today have programs in this space and are working to recruit and retain underutilized talent, or you know, make sure that we have representation at the table. And so, you know, in some ways we're having a lot of really good conversations around race, around gender, but I would also add that disability should be at the forefront of that. You know, people with disabilities are a vital and largely untapped source of talent. And, you know, with, as you mentioned, some of the new technologies that we have access to, it's really leveling the playing field for people with disabilities to feel like they can bring their true selves to the workplace and showcase their skill set. You know, as we talked about with COVID, I think technology and the accessibility that's coming in from that, you know, being able to log in, you know, via VPNs, to have access to laptops, you know, Windows 10, for example, we run on that platform at Willis Towers Watson, and it's so interesting to see all the the resources that are available there. I've been using the text to talk in my Word documents where you just push the dictate button and it types everything up for you. Or, you know, if you're looking to review your documents for spelling, you might notice that now they give you more than one choice for different words that it might become, that you might be trying to choose from. And that's really to help our colleagues with dyslexia, you know, or even having captions during calls such as today's call or any of our other Skype or Microsoft Teams calls. I know it's really important that we're hearing everything or being able to read everything that are part of the conversations. And so, you know, from a technology standpoint, we're really just growing leaps and bounds in our industry, and that should not be a hurdle, that having those accessible resources at our fingertips. But we also know, you know, it's not just about recruiting people with disabilities, but it's also retaining and developing folks. And so there was a study by the Center for Talent Innovation a couple years ago, and as Ashley, you mentioned, about 1 in 4 people identify with a disability. But then when they started to look at how many people self-identify within an organization, and that number is only about 3%. And so that is a shocking number. And so, you know, when you think about that, many people have invisible disabilities or unseen disabilities. And so they're able to navigate a company culture without disclosing their disability. But the question that comes up is, you know, how does that impact them physically or emotionally or mentally? Or how does that impact their relationships with their coworkers or their managers? And so, you know, for me, there's a lot of conversation that I think we'll have today about how do we set up ourselves for success, set up people with disabilities for success, and make our overall workplaces more inclusive. So, you know, I'm just going to go through kind of what we're going to talk about on today's session, but, you know, for the rest of our time, we've got a couple of different panels here. Ashley, you're going to actually start us off by talking about why being inclusive, and it's going to feature Chris Gromitz and Alex Kuhn, who both are from Travelers, and talk a little bit about their experiences there. And then I'm going to lead our second panel discussion, and I've got Marcy Jasper from the Minnesota Department of Economic Development and Rehabilitative Services, and then Susan Winterfield Thompson. She's also going to, Director of Program Services for LifeWorks. She'll be joining me as well. And so, you know, I'm really looking forward to thinking about not only hearing from people with disabilities about their working experience, but also to capture those nuggets of best practices that we can then take back to our own work environments. So finally, at the last part of our session today, we'll be coming back together for a live Q&A. So we really want to include or encourage everyone in our audience today to think about the questions that they might be having. Please type them in the chat box. We'll be answering throughout our session, but we'll also reserve a time to really kind of have, again, more discussion. And then finally, just to keep everyone engaged throughout our 90 minutes, we've got some polls dropped in. And so we're going to ask people to you know, share with us their insights from the polls section as well. So that's a little bit about our overview of time together. And with all that said, I hope we captured everything in our welcome and introduction. I'm going to throw it over to our first poll for our audience.
All right, Lillian, if you wouldn't mind pulling up that first poll question. And I'll read it aloud and offer your the answers. In your opinion, does your employer do a good job at being disability inclusive? Yes, no, I don't know. And we'll just leave that poll open for a few more seconds here. I'm seeing quite a few responses. Hopefully you can all see that poll on your screen and be able to answer. Perfect. All right. Let's close that poll now, and we'll move to poll number 2. And question number 2 is, does your company's hiring process make it easy for people with disabilities to apply?
And again, those answers are yes, no, or I don't know. And we'll give you a few more seconds here to answer the question. All right, I think we can close that poll now. Just to keep kind of an aura of suspense, I am going to not reveal the poll answers right now. We'll do that during our live session in a few moments here. But thank you so much for answering our first two poll questions. So, before I turn your attention to our next segment, I did just want to remind folks that you can use the chat box to ask any questions. We'll be reserving some time, as Day mentioned, at the end of our session to have a live Q&A where we'll bring back all the panelists and be able to answer any of your questions. And right now, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Ashley Oolman for our second panel with Chris Gromitz and Alex Kuhn. So Lillian, can you pull up that video, please?
Thank you so much for joining this session. COVID-19 and its impact on workplaces all over the world is overwhelming. Yet, through these challenges, we learned an important lesson. Businesses could become drastically more accessible, and it happened overnight. There are many common barriers that lead to disproportionate employment outcomes for employees with disabilities. And one major area that keeps barriers in place are common workplace responses. From dress codes to desk spaces, there are unnecessary obstacles that could easily be solved if we put enough effort behind it. For example, what if we challenge social norms by reframing what professional looks like, or how we screen talent for open positions? Right now, all over the world, we have an opportunity to make adjustments that will make an impact for generations to come. This session will explore ways to take advantage of the moment and innovate at work in a way that makes work for everyone. We are so excited to have you here with us, and I'd like to kick us off by getting started. Chris and Alex, can you introduce yourselves?
Yes, my name is Christopher Gromitz. I've been with Travelers for 3 years. And I have brought on to start up the Business Resource Center here at Travelers for the Staff Council legal side of Travelers. And Alex is one of my employees. Alex?
Yep, as Chris said, I'm Alex, and I'm one of the employees at the BRC. I've been there almost as long as Chris has, about 3 years. I was brought on as one of the first as a member of the first wave LifeWorks program, and I found success with it and have been with Travelers ever since.
Thank you both so much. Next, I was hoping one of you could talk a little bit more about your team and the business need that you have fulfilled together.
Yeah, there was a business need in our Staff Council area in Travelers. That really wanted to find a way to take some of the legal assistants and the paralegals' jobs and their duties and really transition them over to another team so that they could focus more on assisting the attorneys as far as supporting them and writing the paperwork for them. And what they decided was they would take all of the incoming mail that was going to our Staff Council offices and direct it to my team. And what I did was I stepped in and I trained this team to be able to identify and really compartmentalize the documents and put them in the digital folders so that the legal staff could then access them. And I really found a way to break it down so that it was really in ways that other people that don't really have any legal background could understand. No matter what the document states, they could break that down and they could put it into the folders, like I said, so they could be accessible for the legal staff. And that's just kind of the beginning of really what we're doing with the team, and we're looking for other areas really to try to find and support our Staff Council offices.
Yeah, prior to my employment here, I had no formal legal training, no college courses, nothing. But with the 8-week training course we had, I was able to learn everything I needed to do this job and do it well. Same goes for all members of my team right now. I don't think anyone else on my team has any, formal background in this stuff, but we're still able to do the job and do a good job of it. Apparently, the paralegals have been really happy with our performance thus far. So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to see why we would need to go to law school for X amount of years just to do, well, this. So it's just nice that we're able to fulfill that need without all the hustle and bustle,
Thank you both so much for your descriptions. From what I gathered, it sounds like the way that you're finding candidates, the way that you're training candidates, Chris, and then the way that you all continue to work and approach your work every day is different. And you've taken the time to think outside of the box of ways that you can make the entire group be more successful. Would you say that that's correct?
Yeah, that is. I mean, we went about it a really different way. The model is that we partnered with LifeWorks in vocational rehab through the department, state of Minnesota. And what they would do is they would find candidates for me, and they would go through, like Alex said, a 6 to 8 week training class. And really what I did was I broke everything down so that I could take anybody that really doesn't have any legal experience and really train them on how to identify these documents and really fulfill the need. And I think it was a lot of it is really going into the training and really breaking it down for each individual. Because I know there's a lot of trainings that is kind of really broad-based, and really the way I approach the training is you really have to break it down and understand each individual so that they can know and understand it, and really what they can take away from it and support the company as a whole.
Very good. Why don't we talk a little bit more about the two of you as individuals on the team? Alex, can you talk a little bit about how you've grown as an employee being a part of this team?
Well, like I said, when I started, I had no formal legal background, and I mean, I've been at the job for 3 years, so in that time I've learned how to do so much more. Like I can identify pleading documents, motion documents, record documents, almost like that. And I've even been brought on to train newer staff on how to do the work that we do. That's just something I never really imagined myself doing, just training new people in this kind of thing and having them come to me with questions about something that 3 years ago I would have been like, no idea, in the same boat. It's just, this has been such a wonderful opportunity that I really don't think I could have gotten here just, without LifeWorks' help and all Travelers' help they've done.
I really appreciate what you shared, Alex, and I think something that's important for the audience members to really wrap their minds around is that though LifeWorks and Voc Rehab and Travelers came together to make this partnership, your work and the time that you put in and your commitment is really what got you, it sounds like, to where you are now. And the really beautiful thing about it is that the entire team now has an additional leader that they can look up to. Because you've done such a great job not only learning what your role is, but then on top of it, you pay it forward by teaching others. Would you say that that's accurate?
Yes, that's totally accurate. I mean, I want to see this business grow as much as it can, and I'm doing everything I can to help it along, training new staff, putting in all the work I can, doing my job to the best of my abilities. Yeah, just putting it all in there.
Thank you for that. And then on your end, Chris, can you talk a little bit about how this team and leading this team and being a part of this accessible hiring initiative, how have you grown as a leader?
What's really changed me as a manager, I know in my past career, I've managed other law firms. And the big difference between the two really is the past employment that I've had, I've really been kind of hiring people right out of college. And I was always lucky to have them for maybe a year, 2 years at most. And they were really learning, but I think they're ultimately in the back of their head, they were waiting to just kind of jump on to bigger and better things. And really the difference being part of this, being part of really the dynamic of the Business Resource Center and really what we've created here has allowed me to really grow as a manager because I'm really, one part of it is the training aspect. It's been a lot of fun really to train each individual. And when I say that, I mean really getting to know and understand each personality and their types of learning, because everybody learns differently. But also, and then as a manager, it's helped me grow because, I do have employees, but it's become a team and it's a team atmosphere. And, a lot of these individuals, including Alex, I mean, they've started careers and they want to grow. They want to stay with Travelers and they enjoy being on the team. And they just enjoy being part of something that is, it's been a fun ride. And it's something that's made kind of my job easier, just watching this team succeed, watching the team grow. And I love being a part of it. And it's something, it's a team unlike any other team that I've ever had to manage. And I think that's what's been fun about it. But it's also challenged me as a manager too. It's something that, it's not easy because it really challenges you individually, because you are dealing with a lot of different individuals, different personalities, different behaviors. But ultimately, in the end, when you find a way to really get that to work, it's a lot of fun to watch.
Thank you so much for that, Chris. Alex, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your team dynamics. What are your teammates like, and what's the feel of the team like every day when you're at work?
Well, it's been different now that we've been working from home for the past 6 months or so. We mostly communicate by email and Skype these days, but we're still, the way we see it, we're all in the same boats. We're all trying to get our work done. We all got the same work to do. We can't really afford to be, cutthroat or infighting, and it's just not that kind of environment, Like, we do what we can to help each other out. We ask questions. We sometimes, if someone's got more work than they can handle at the moment, I might take a few docs off of them, or they might take a few docs off of me, or they might, like I said, have questions. A lot of people come to me about that, which is something I really wouldn't have expected long ago. But yeah, we're really all in the same boat here. We're all trying to get the same work done. So yeah, we give it our all every day.
Thank you so much for that, Alex. It sounds like it's been a really awesome experience for the group of folks that are working on this team, and just being able to bond over having a similar experience or onboarding experience seems like it's been a really important piece of you all gelling as a team.
It has. No.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
No, I said it's been fun. It's really to see the group that I have, and to know that really they came in the door with little to no legal experience. And there really was no plan, I think, to even go down the legal path in their career, and just to see them grow and to see what they can look at now. I mean, I can kind of almost throw any kind of a legal document in front of them, and they're able to really identify what it is, kind of the purpose of it, and where it goes. So it's been fun to watch.
Thank you for sharing that perspective, Chris. I actually have one last question for you. Based on the lessons that you've learned being a part of this team, what do you think other employers are missing out on if they don't take the leap and try to be more inclusive and accessible?
Well, I think there's untapped potential out there. And I really feel that some employers could be missing out on some really hardworking and almost really loyal employees. Because that's one thing that I've seen now is really everybody on my team, they want to stay for the long haul. They want to be a part of this. They actually see a career that they might not have seen before. Kind of give you an example here. I got one individual on my team, and if you would have asked him 3 years ago if he was going to go into the legal field, he would have said, not a chance. And right now he's in school to get his paralegal license, which is really fun to see. And, you know, it's one of those things where it wasn't even on his radar. And now that he's in it and he understands it and he knows it in a way it's kind of broken down to him, he's learned it. He's learned the job that he does. He enjoys it and he wants to take it even further. So I think, you know, going back to your question about employers, what are they missing out? I really think that there's an area of employees out there that I think are getting overlooked, and they're hardworking employees. They're probably some of the hardest working employees that I've ever had to manage, which is really another part of it that makes it fun too.
Thank you so much for that, Chris. It sounds like in an industry that's all about risk analysis, you all took a chance and it's totally paid off.
It has.
So thank you both so much, guys. I really appreciate your time today. And more importantly, I just want to thank you both for the work that you're doing to make the workplace more accessible and inclusive for everybody. So hats off to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I'd like to thank Ashley for your facilitation, Alex, Chris for sharing a bit of your story on why being inclusive is the right decision for organizations and participants. As a reminder, we're going to have all of our panelists back live at the end for a roundtable discussion to answer any questions that you may have. But love to bring up the next polling question. Lillian, if you don't mind, thank you. So in addition to internal resources such as human resources, employee resource groups, are you aware of other support organizations like nonprofits, state agencies that can assist you in developing a disability inclusive hiring program? So we're getting some results in. Wonderful. Thanks for your participation. Again, this is going to lead to some, I think, interesting dialogue at the end of our session. So Lillian, if we close this one off, and the next question. So 2020 marks a key milestone with the Americans with Disabilities Act. What year was the ADA signed into law? 70, 80, 90, or 2000? And again, we will have some additional commentary and discussion on this in a little bit. Wonderful. Thanks for everyone's participation. Now we're going to roll on to another panel. So it is my pleasure to introduce our final panel. Stacy is going to lead a conversation including Susan from LifeWorks and Marcy from the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. They are two local experts on how to start or enhance a disability inclusive program. And then again, after this panel, we'll all be back to review our poll questions, answer roundtable questions. So Lillian, if you don't mind, if you can bring up Stacy's panel. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our next section on how to be inclusive. I've got our two guest speakers today, and I'd like to have them introduce themselves as we get started. Marcy?
Hi, Marcy Jasper. I work with Vocational Rehabilitation Services with the state of Minnesota.
And I am Susan Winterfeld Thompson. I'm the Director of Program Services at LifeWorks Services in Minnesota.
Well, thank you so much for being part of our panel. I'm thrilled to be talking with you today and learning a little bit more and gaining some of your insights about disability inclusion in the workplace. So I'd really just like to ask a few questions and kind of ping pong back and forth. And I'm, thinking about the last panel, Chris and Alex talked a lot about taking roles and and rethinking our approach to them. And in some cases, it was really about taking roles and breaking them into digestible procedures. So it creates almost like an opportunity for process improvement. And now that end result is that the team is providing excellent support to the broader legal team. And I think the other added benefit is that it's established careers for Alex and the broader group. So Marcy, I'm going to throw this question to you. You know, not only do businesses have a legal or ethical obligation to hire people with disabilities, but can you share why it's important to create a work culture to help people with disabilities thrive?
Yes, I believe there are many reasons why it's important for employers to hire people with disabilities and to create an inclusive culture within their business. The unemployment rate for people with disabilities is still double that of people without disabilities. So that's a huge untapped talent pool. And right now with COVID, it's even larger. An inclusive culture really helps everyone feel like they belong. When I work alongside people like me and unlike me, it really helps culture new ideas and creativity. I can't imagine working with just a bunch of me's. Nothing would ever get done in that culture. We need more. Disability inclusion is really making sure everybody has the same opportunities to participate in every aspect of life to the best of their abilities and desires. Disability inclusion efforts are important to people with disabilities and employers, such as increased innovation. An example of that, Microsoft, Google, HP, they all hire people with disabilities and they have programs and they help them invent software. So think of that, not only the innovation, but also the increased access to their products and in turn, increased revenue for all of these businesses, a full circle. Also, improve shareholder value, improve productivity from all employees, and enhanced reputation out in the community. Studies show that people are more likely to shop or buy from companies that employ people with disabilities. A business I work with, they hired several individuals with disabilities. Many of them were deaf folks. So with that, what they did was they brought in interpreters, started sign language classes for the rest of the employees so that everyone could communicate with each other. One thing this company measured was that the attendance and the morale increased significantly among their employees without disabilities. So it's a huge example of inclusion. Organizations that have successfully established a diverse workforce can really reap the benefits that it provides, including a wide array of perspectives and experiences. I want businesses to hire people with disabilities because it's a smart thing to do rather than because they are told that they must. In my experience, businesses sometimes fear what they don't know about disability and sometimes what they do know about disability. I highly suggest at this point to reach out to your local vocational rehabilitation services or a community provider that serves individuals with disabilities and ask them for guidance to help you through this process. It's not as scary as people think, as you can tell with the story you just heard with travelers. Currently, businesses are struggling to find good employees. And as you heard, 1 in 4 Americans has a disability. The more inclusive that you can be as a company, the better candidates will choose to work at your company.
Yeah, I think you're really striking a number of important points there, Marcy, and thanks so much for sharing that perspective. You know, as we're thinking about with the pandemic and COVID-19, businesses are starting to reopen and bringing people back into the workplace. And, you know, I think one of the main perspectives that employers are trying to do is thinking about how to keep employees safe. And so they may be, you know, making protocols around, you know, 6 feet between one another, or wearing face masks, or keeping their hands clean, you know, all sorts of things. And Susan, maybe if you could share from your perspective, as we're learning about, you know, the post-pandemic world and our workplace, how can we embrace accessibility for everyone, but also how can we really bring to the table a lens of supporting our colleagues with disabilities as they are returning to the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. We certainly have learned a lot through this pandemic. So I think the first and foremost, most important is accessibility. So really looking at how can you make your spaces, your information, the way that we connect today virtually more accessible for folks. Do you have information posted that's in simple language? You just heard Chris talk about how they took and they made information as simple and straightforward as possible. I think especially today with everything that's changing all the time in our environment, it's critical to make sure that the language you use is straightforward and as simple as possible. obviously things change quite frequently, so really making sure that people feel connected is another good point. Having leaders do one-on-one meetings with folks, really taking time to check in with people, checking in with your colleagues, and then having point people in your organization so that when people do come across those things that they might not be sure of, or maybe they don't know how to interpret something or what the most up-to-date version of a process or procedure is, they have somebody to reach out to. They know who to ask and have that personal connection to get the information that they need.
Yeah, I think that our workplaces are really changing, and there is that opportunity to make them more accessible, to increase our communication with one another so that we all feel like we feel safe when we return to the workplace. So, you know, an interesting stat that I found was that many of our companies, 90% of our companies, you know, really are working to prioritize diversity. But if you take a deeper look, only about 4% focus on disability. And, you know, at my own company, Willis Towers Watson, we've recently expanded our workability network, which our workability network is focused on disabilities, mental health, and neurodiversity. And so we're excited to be able to support our colleagues in a better way. We also have had, you know, cohorts where we've hired in neurodiverse talent, and we've got operations in our White Plains office as well as the UK and Manila. And so, you know, we are focused on that within our organization. But I'd like to have you both respond to this next question, which is, can you share some additional best practices that you've seen from, you know, maybe Minnesota employers who have really focused on disability hiring and some of the success that they've had from it? So Marcy, I'll start with you.
Yeah, definitely. I have many to share, but you know, besides the traveler story you just heard about, but I'll pick a couple of my other favorites. Number one being the Walgreens model. Randy Lewis, he had a son on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, and as he was growing up, he was wondering how he was going to take care of himself. So highly suggest to look up Randy Lewis if you don't know this story. He started the Walgreens Distribution Center Initiative. And everybody knows what Walgreens is. I think they're on every corner. He said that they always hired people with disabilities to do work such as cleaning, but never their mission critical work. And he really felt that people with disabilities could offer so much more value to their company. So they opened a new distribution center that was highly automated, that worked for people with disabilities and for people without. The distribution center hired over 33% of people with disabilities, and it was their highest producing distribution center in the country. He said they held all of their employees to the same standard, but in the design of the distribution center, he made sure that people had input, people with disabilities had input, so that it really did work for everyone. He has a book titled No Greatness Without Goodness that talks about this journey. We had a distribution center in Minnesota where we partnered with Walgreens to employ individuals. One example there is they employed over 10 deaf forklift drivers that had no accidents because of a couple little accommodations that were put into place. So Walgreens really has a good model throughout the states with their distribution centers and also with their stores. Another great initiative is the State of Minnesota Connect 700-hour program. This is a program that is geared to help get more people with disabilities into state government. It gives individuals 700 hours to work in the job and prove that they can do the job without going through a formal interview process, where many people with disabilities can get tripped up on. Although they do need to meet all of the essential functions of the job in order to move forward in the position, they don't have to sit and go through that panel interview like many people do when they want to try to get into the state of Minnesota. So now we have individuals in the state who are working in full-time positions from clerical all the way up to director level positions because of this program. Livable wage jobs that people can be proud of and support their family on, that many of them say they never would have gotten without this program. Lastly, United Health Group has started an All Abilities internship program. The positions that they have in their internship program range from desktop support to policy writer, sales and communication specialist to admin assistant. Just another example that people with disabilities really can do all positions within a company and not just entry-level cleaning, clerical, and retail jobs. This is a 12-week internship program that then after they are done with the internship, they're hired full-time, again, full-time with great wages into United Health Group that, again, a job they can be proud of.
Marcy, I think what you so important, that piece around dignity. We all want to come to our work every day and feel like we can bring our best talents, and it's more exciting to come to work every day when you feel like your talents are valued. So I think those are really great points, and that people with disabilities can do any job. It's not just focused on one job. So thanks for sharing those examples. Susan, how about some examples you've seen?
Yeah, one of our great business partners here in the Twin Cities is the Metropolitan Airport Commission. So we have worked with them for quite a few years, and they have a plethora of businesses that they house out there at the airport. And it's really offered a lot of the folks that we support the opportunity to come in and try out a position and then gain skills and experience and move into other areas and advance their career. So just like I'm not in the same position doing the same work that I was in when I first graduated from high school or college, we all want to grow and learn and develop in our careers. And the MAC has really provided that opportunity for a lot of the folks that we work with. And it's been really fun to see people learn and grow and develop and get to try out things and move around, as well as be exposed and a part of the great, vibrant community that's out at the airport. Another really great success story for us and really strong business partner here in the Twin Cities is Allianz. They have worked with us to source talent through their staffing agency and then really help identify the skills and interests of the candidates and help them to move around in the organization into different departments. We have folks who are doing data analytical work. They are responsible for millions and millions of dollars in policy. And they had the opportunity to learn the skills along the way and really follow a career progression to grow into their career. And I think that's really important too.
Yeah, it's, you know, we just have to focus on that retention and development of all colleagues. And so these are really great examples that you've shared that I appreciate that, Susan. Thank you so much. So, you know, Marcy, you touched a little bit on this where, you know, that interview process, it's hard for the best interviewer to get through it. And, you know, I just want to talk a little bit about how to help people understand the barriers that might discourage people with disabilities from applying for work within an organization. You know, I've seen really complicated application processes. You know, sometimes online accessibility is an issue. We've talked a little bit about like screen readers, for example, and even the language of job descriptions. So, you know, many times we've included physical tasks that might not necessarily be mission critical to a role that we're hiring for, you know, things around driving or typing or lifting or the ability to sit for long periods of time. You know, those sort of like ways that we've coded descriptions to weed out colleagues. And, you know, I think I know a lot of companies right now are really taking a close look at job descriptions. They're looking for gendered language that might screen out women, for example. We're also looking at it from a race and ethnic background. You know, how can we make sure that our job descriptions are more inclusive? And so this seems like really the right time to also be thinking about it from a disability awareness perspective. So, Marcy, I'm going to ask you, how do you coach organizations to, you know, think about how they can remove barriers or bias from the recruitment process?
Yep, great question. And we get this question from businesses a lot. Every time I originally talk to a business, I ask them, what do they already have in place when it comes to hiring people with disabilities, and how does their process work? Many of them say they're just beginning. So as you said, Stacy, we start with the job descriptions and kind of let's look at your job descriptions and see what they say. And again, where are people being weeded out? What great employees are you weeding out by your job descriptions or online applications? How many times have you hired the perfect employee because they had everything that you wanted in them, everything that was on the job description, and then it really turned out to be the not so perfect employee? Sometimes I think that goes on the wayside. Several years ago, the state of Minnesota went through all of their job descriptions and they took out what they considered discriminatory language, such as needing a license for the position when you really don't have to drive anywhere. They actually found it a lot with their clerical or their administrative assistant positions. All of them said needed a license, even though they just sat at their desk all day. So they took a lot of that language out in order to get not only people with disabilities, but just people that just ride the bus, people that don't have a license. So just to be more inclusive. And with this, that's where the Connect 700-hour program really came into play, is after they went through these job descriptions. It's an untapped potential out there that's really getting overlooked. The second thing that we talked about and that we mentioned, Stacy, was the interview. When travelers came to us, one of the things they said was, we won't be interviewing them. We'll allow you and LifeWorks to interview the candidates and decide who's going to be best for this program, which was kind of a heaven sent, because people really struggle with interview, especially think of somebody on the spectrum where they have a hard time sometimes looking people in the eye. They have a hard time expressing themselves. They have a hard time answering lots of different questions because baby being black and white. And so that's really a big struggle for people, is that interview process. So really think differently about that, and how can you think outside the box with that? You know, sometimes we put all of our eggs into the basket of interviewing, and that's not always maybe the best way to do it. So really try to have more of a conversation with people and reach into their skill sets, and what are you hiring them for? What do you really need them for, and how can you get that out of the interview? Another key piece is really getting in from the top down for some of the, whether it's programs you start, or even just if you're going to hire, if you're going through one of our agencies to hire, is getting that in from the top down. Again, with travelers, this came from the top management, and they said they wanted to make a concerted effort to hire people with disabilities. Too often I work with hiring manager they are all in and they're ready to go, and then they move it up the chain and the rest of the crew just doesn't buy in. So really working on getting those key players kind of involved in the process. And when you do get those key players on board, then have someone come in, have an agency come in and provide disability education. A lot of the agencies that serve individuals out there do that. Vocational rehab services will come in and do that. And just let your employees ask those tough questions to those experts there who can really help guide you through the process. You know, when I do this, we close the door and I say, ask the questions that you may get in trouble for, and I will help work through that with you. So then when we do start this program, everybody's at a much more comfortable level. So those are just a couple things to start off with. There's many more, but these are just a couple.
Yeah, I think you're so right there, Marcy, where it's, you know, bringing in an outside organization to help train coworkers as well as the manager, right? Because we want to set the new hire up for success. And if we have biases that are already started within the organization, you know, it just makes it more difficult. And so I love that idea of, let's bring in somebody to help make sure that our coworkers and managers feel really comfortable and can make this the best onboarding experience for that new hire. Great tip. So, you know, when we started the session, we shared that stat from the CDC about 1 in 4 adults having a disability. And so, you know, we also know that disability impacts every single demographic group. So when we think about the concept of intersectionality of identities, whether that's gender or race or ethnicity or sexual orientation or maybe religion, we know that this is really kind of a complication for people with disability when they're seeking their full inclusive self. And so maybe Susan, maybe you can talk a little bit about this. How do we help employees show up authentically, and how do we help them feel like they can bring their full selves to the workplace?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Stacy. I think it's really important for all of us to foster welcome, open cultures in our organizations. So really seeking out that authentic lived experience in each of those areas that you mentioned, and really looking around the table and making intentional actions and seeking out the voice of people whose lived experience may be with disability. And a lot of folks, that identity might intersect with something else. And so being aware that those multiple intersectionalities or points of contact with our identities, they can add layers of barrier, especially around employment. And really being aware of that, I think making space to have conversations and engage with people, and being open and welcome to those different perspectives. I think that's really critical and important to helping to have people show up and be authentic. I think sometimes we tend to shy away from some of the topics that make us uncomfortable. We might find ourselves getting defensive. And I think we really have an opportunity today, right now in front of us, each one of us, to take time and really dig within ourselves and figure out why that is, but then go out and seek out those experiences and those relationships and those connections with people whose perspective is different from ours. I think that's really the biggest piece that's going to help folks be welcome and be comfortable to show up as their true selves. I also think that there's some great resources out there that for leaders or for disability advocacy groups can go out and find some help to have these conversations, some assistance in how to talk about things like Marcy talked about. Facilitated conversation can be really important. And so I'd be happy to share some of those resources. One of my favorites is the Disability Visibility Project that's directed and founded by a woman named Alice Wong. If you haven't looked at it, I highly recommend you check it out. It gives really diverse perspectives and she has a lot of guest writers, and it can really challenge some of the stereotypes that a lot of us face and deal with in the workplace.
Thanks, Susan. It sounds like we should add Alice to our social media threads. That would be great. And I think you're so right when you're, thinking about, we're here in Minnesota and sometimes there's that Minnesota nice and we don't want to talk about things that are important, but this is the time. This is the time to have those courageous conversations, to really break down any barriers. We work with one another for 40 plus hours a week. Like, let's make this a good experience and so that we can work better together. So I really appreciate those insights, Susan, about how we can help one another bring our full selves to work.
All right, welcome back to our live portion of the dive-in session. With our last session, I did want to just say that I really appreciated our speakers and our panelists, Marcy and Susan, for sharing all of their insights and ideas in this best practices of disability inclusion in the workplace. So we've gotten a few questions in the live Q&A, but we'd like to encourage you to continue to post any questions in the Q&A from the audience, and we're happy to start to answer those. Before we begin, I do want to just share the results of our live poll. So Lillian, if you wouldn't mind just bringing that up for us. So our first question was, in your opinion, does your employer do a good job at being disability inclusive? We said we're kind of split here, with 46% saying yes, 17% saying no, and 35% saying I don't know. And so I'll be curious to hear from the panel any reactions to that. And maybe after listening to a couple of our speakers today, you might have some ideas to start opening those conversations up. Can you go to poll number 2, please? All right, does your company's hiring process make it easy for people with disabilities to apply? Again, a number of the folks on this call said, I don't know. That's our highest one at 64%. 23% said yes, and 11% said no. So there's definitely work to be done in this space around our hiring process. And poll number 3. So the question again is, in addition to internal resources such as HR or ERGs, are you aware of other support organizations or nonprofits? And so let's see, looking at this result, we have 38% say yes and 61% said no. So it's helpful that we had both Marcy and Susan on to kind of talk a little bit about how interventions from nonprofit and state organizations can really enhance your disability hiring process. Let's go to poll number 4, please. All right, this one was to test your knowledge about the Americans with Disabilities Act and what year the ADA was signed. 1970, 1980, 1990, or 2000. And the correct answer is, drum roll, it was 1990. So we did want to just bring up, why we wanted to call out the ADA and the importance that this is marking the 30th anniversary of the signing of the ADA. And, it's really such an important civil rights law. It prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of their public life. That's so around jobs, schools, transportation, whether you're in the public or private sector. And, this was really, by calling it out as the 30th anniversary, we want to help you to think about the momentum of the work that we need to do in the disability space. And so, when you're leaving today's session, we hope that you kind of think about, wow, we've been in this space for 30 years. Where is our organization? What can I do to do more? Just kind of thinking about some key dates that are coming up. October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month. In December is the International Day of Awareness for People with Disabilities. How can we leverage those upcoming significant days to honor the milestone that we just passed with the 30th anniversary of the ADA and the importance that it is in the workplace? So thanks, everybody, for answering those poll questions. I do want to just pause and ask the panel, from the results, was any of that surprising to you? I can go first.
I think
I'm
not realizing that there were external resources actually surprised me a little bit. And I think it just really reinforces the importance of dialogues like we're having today, and that if you're in the position in a company to influence hiring, you don't have to do it alone. There are a lot of external experts that will help you along that path. So I was surprised at that number, actually.
I can chime in next. I'm on the opposite side. I'm not surprised by that at all. Being a person who myself has an unseen disability, there are all sorts of things that are happening behind the scenes and below the surface that a lot of folks are not aware of. A big part of how we can advance. Somebody talks in the chat, they were asking about pay equity, leadership, career progression, leadership development, and things like that. A lot of what is happening is that we don't think that we have a lot of experiences working alongside people with disabilities when we actually do. We also don't think about things like accommodations or optimizing workplace performance for the sake of making, the space more competitive and equitable. So on my end, I'm not actually surprised that there are a lot of folks out there that aren't quite sure. And definitely that's one huge way that we can all as individuals make an impact on employment in this way, is making sure that we know what's available to us as leaders or to us as colleagues as well.
And I'd like to jump in on this too, and I agree with Ashley that I'm not surprised at that number. I think one of the things with like our state services that are in every state, we don't do a very good job of marketing our services and what we do out there. So there's so many people that are unaware of what we do. And once they find out, they're like, you are the hidden gem. And so there is a vocational rehab services in every state, along with community partners like LifeWorks in every state that you guys have access to help you kind of navigate this pathway.
Thank you, Ashley, Jim, and Marcy. I appreciate those insights. I do want to just transition a little bit to the Q&A that was submitted. And our first question, Ashley, I'd like to ask you this. The question is, how do we approach HR or management to help them understand about disabilities outside of, say, physical disabilities? Can you talk a little bit about invisible disabilities?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I really liked that Susan and Marcy were talking about were, in general, just talking, thinking about the way that we have job postings differently. And sometimes the way that we are advertising or listing things is one kind of foot in the door, a way that we can get started. Some things that appeal to managers, leadership, and HR across the board that I found in the work that I do is highlighting the importance of expanding a candidate pool. It's always really important for us to be casting as wide of a net as possible. The next important thing that you can talk about, people don't always make this connection, but making sure that we are reaching employees or candidates with disabilities is a way for us to diversify our workforce. And there's all sorts of data and metrics all about the ways in which diverse teams outperform homogenous teams. So you could talk all sorts of data about that topic. We we like to highlight the ways that businesses have optimized what they do through innovation. So I think somebody mentioned somewhere in the chat, kind of talking about how having a specialized program or a specialized opportunity might not be the answer. And I would have to say I agree with that. In some cases, a business is asking for or needing some extra support to get started. But what they almost always learn is that the things that they are doing to support their new employees with disabilities oftentimes can be adapted and modified and addressed throughout the organization. So for example, businesses are learning to become more inclusive within their hiring practices and things like that. So there are so many different ways that you can kind of angle the conversation. And I would just recommend that you think about what is most important to your workplace culture overall. Does your workplace really pride themselves on being innovative? Do they really highlight how competitive they are? There's all sorts of ways that businesses as organizations kind of identify. And I would think about the ways in which diversifying your workforce through hiring more employees with disabilities intentionally can contribute to that end goal.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashley. It kind of leads into the next question that I'd like to maybe ask travelers to consider answering, maybe Jim or Chris or Alex. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of neurodiversity on innovation or business outcomes within travelers, or just, even generally? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, we've seen really some processes that we've streamlined because of our business model, and really have made it a lot more efficient for a lot of the offices that we support. We do support all the staff council offices across the U.S. I have a team of 19 individuals, along with a mirror over in Hartford that does the same thing, and they've partnered with one of their state organizations. Very similar to what we did here in Minnesota. And really the two business resource centers, what we call them, have really partnered together, and we have really assisted all of the staff council offices and streamlined a lot of jobs really some jobs that paralegals and legal assistants would do, and we've made it a lot more efficient so that attorneys can get access to the information that we do get to them a lot quicker, a lot sooner. And really, like I've said before, that we free up the paralegals to really handle their stuff, handle the attorney stuff a lot more, and kind of get in depth more in the work that I think really benefit the attorneys more. So it's been really great to see that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That's I think your whole team has been innovative as far as the way you used to do the work in your, nationally versus in two centralized organizations. Another way I would answer the question is taking it back to our initial setup of the day, where we met at the Autism in the Workplace Roundtable, and some of the other partners that are out there, the Microsofts of the world and the SAPs of the world, they're absolutely from the perspective of nothing without us, nothing about us without us. And I totally agree with that concept. And they've got folks that are on the leading edge of innovation and developing products. So, I think we've got great opportunity in our industry, from the insurance perspective, but just more broadly, the innovation possibilities are really immense. So, would encourage everybody to just, dive in, get with the spirit and try something new.
Yeah, just adding a little commentary from the Willis Towers Watson side, we have a number of neurodiverse cohorts in the U.S., in the UK, and actually then in Manila. And in one of our areas of business, our segment is benefits delivery and BDA. And we have a cohort. We were really looking at analysis of, pensions and some data. And what we were finding is we were struggling with accuracy and making sure that the information was correct before delivering it to our clients. And it was pretty time-intensive exercise. It took about 30 hours per each client. Colleagues were, accomplishing that, but it was labor intensive. And so then when we hired in a cohort to kind of think about the process, to think about where we could maybe make some shifts in how we approach the work, we actually slimmed that hours down to about 10 hours per client. And so, it was just kind of using that idea of how can we do this a little differently? How can we use innovation? And how can we, use talent who's really comfortable looking at data in this specific way? And so it was a successful win for the team that's, in our BDA segment as they're moving forward with it. I want to just go on to another question that was posed by Ken, and wondering if maybe Marcy or Ashley or Susan can kind of talk about this. And Jim, with your recruitment experience, any advice on how we can design job postings that would encourage neurodiverse candidates to feel more comfortable to apply? We talked a little bit about it in our session where, some words that can trip folks up, saying, ability to drive, ability to, great communication skills. What are some other words that you see are challenging phrases?
Team player, sometimes. Do we really all need to be a team player? Perhaps not. So, that would be my contribution. And any other thoughts from the rest of the panel?
Yeah, I would agree. Avoid, team player, ability to drive. Don't put too much emphasis on, some things that people with disabilities might have difficulty with. That's really all I have to say on that.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Something I would contribute to that question would just be, like Susan and Marcy talked about, taking out anything that's unnecessary and really going through line by line and figuring out what is absolutely critical to the work. I would also challenge employers to really be thinking about the ways in which people can color outside of the lines. We exist in really prescriptive, really almost like swim lanes of the ways in which we think that a job should look or should be performed. And some of my greatest contributions, I can speak for myself as a neurodivergent person, is the ways in which I've taken a role and made it successful in my own way. And so I think that's really important too. A couple of other fun things just to challenge yourself to do would be being really transparent about the hiring process on the front end. So if that's on your actual job posting, perhaps it's on the company profile where you're posting your job listings, but making sure that you're really transparent about what the process is. Lots of times we see things such as, we are an equal employment opportunity, employer, and we will make accommodations if you need them, but it's like, well, for what? How do I know what to ask for if I don't know what to expect? So being transparent about what the hiring process looks like can be a tip-off that an organization or business is going to be willing to work with a person who colors outside of the lines or might do that. And then the last thing is a newer trend that I've been seeing in my role as a disability inclusion and accessibility consultant is that folks are stating their statistics of their own workforce on job description. So they will talk about specific demographic groups and say, X% of our workforce are women, X% of our workforce identify as employees with disabilities or whatever it might be. But that's a cool way, again, to kind of show that not only does the employer value those contributions that the folks are bringing within the workplace, but also that they're willing to be transparent about the progress that they're making as well.
Yeah, I think on that note, really, you have to look, and this goes to kind of any of the employers are looking, well, how do I do this? You got to kind of think outside the box. You have your standard interview process, which I know is not comfortable for a lot of people. And I think Alex would probably agree with me that, a lot of the normal interview processes just don't work for him and even a lot of people, especially people with disabilities. It's a very hard hurdle to get over. And really what you have to do, what I would suggest to a lot of employers is really reach out to the state or some organizations and really, look for the candidates that I think get passed by either through the quick resume checks or the quick interview processes, because really you're looking for people and individuals that can do a job and really not grading them on how clean and how nice a resume looks or how well they can interact in a very stressful environment such as an interview process. And I know that, Alex has touched on it before, that our different interview really kind of really worked for him and for really everybody else on my team. I don't know if you want to touch on that, Alex.
Yes. I'm seeing that sort of in the public chat as well. The normal interview process can be a huge hurdle to overcome for a lot of people. So I really think, and also adding on what some people were saying earlier, really with job descriptions and job postings, transparency and being very specific, that's really what's most important, I think. So that's about all I have to say on that.
Yeah, one thing to just add from the recruiting perspective, often our interview process is looking for reasons to say no. And what I think we would all encourage everyone to do is look for reasons to say yes. Take this from a positive perspective.
We like to say look for the ability, not the disability.
And I just want to kind of echo what everybody has said up to this point. The interview process can be very tough for anyone, but especially tough for people with disabilities. We get a lot of businesses that will do phone screens first, and that cuts out so many people that don't even get the opportunity to really show who they are and what they can do. Like Jim said, they're trying to get the no's out of the way first, and that gets really unfortunate. Alex had made it clear for several years now that, again, this probably wouldn't have been a position he would have gotten if he would have had to go through the panel interview process. But the interview we did, myself and LifeWorks together, we sat down with each individual and we had a conversation with them. We explained what the position was going to entail, and we kind of asked, how are you going to fit into this position, and tell us about your experience. And it just made it much more comfortable for people. And then we put them into the job and we let them try it out. The state agencies and a lot of nonprofits allow individuals to do that too. So work with your state agencies and community partners on letting people try out a job so you can actually see the skill sets on the job versus through the interview. So there's lots of different options that can be done to hire individuals with disabilities. And like people have been saying, you just need to think outside the box and reach out for help if you need it.
And I would just
Thanks,
add
everyone.
That
Go ahead,
into the
Susan.
comment. Yeah, I would just add that I think a lot of times it's that demonstrated skill portion where, to get at what Ashley was talking about, you get a chance to see some of the innovative ways somebody can color outside those lines that you would have no idea of if you just went through a traditional phone screen, application process, interview. And so really giving somebody the chance to come in to try out the work. We were able to do that through the internship process here at Travelers, but there's other ways that you can revamp your interview process so that people can demonstrate their creativity and additional skills that could benefit your organization that you may not have put on your job description even. So there's other benefits to really thinking about those interview processes, and I think taking it a step beyond just the job description.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. I know we have just a few minutes left of our panel. I wanted to just kind of tie two things together. We had a question in the Q&A from an audience member, Jessica, about what our thoughts are on the wage equity for individuals with disabilities. And we actually were talking about this last week because there had been some headlines and some big moves around the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. and that there's been some adjustments that is going to be revoked, and to work to paying people with disabilities the same wage. And so we actually had a kind of a quick discussion about it, but I know Wes also posted an article in the public chat so that you can take a look at it to just become a little bit more familiar with the topic and where the minimum wage for workers with disabilities is at. With our last few minutes left, I do want to just, ask the participants to have their own moment of reflection. We covered a lot of topics today, and we hope that you feel like you can walk away with your own aha moment. But we hope that you would be willing to share in the public chat maybe just, what is one thing that you're willing to commit to? We hope that you feel inspired. We hope that this will, help you go back to your office and maybe share a conversation with someone. Maybe it's a conversation with your recruiters and your talent acquisition team. And if you wouldn't mind just helping us learn a little bit more about what inspired you or what you feel you'll take action on, please add that to the public chat. Hopefully it will also inspire others to see your work as well. And then finally, as you're working on that, I do just want to make sure that we acknowledge a little bit about the Festival of Dive-In. This is really a sector-wide collaboration. We're so thankful for the 17 global partners that, support us, but also the local perspective as well. And so I want to just, again, thank our speakers today for all of your efforts in bringing this conversation to the forefront, for sharing your insights, for sharing your own personal experiences. It's been really thought-provoking for me to be a part of. And so I also just want to say this is our first year doing our virtual event, and we really want to say a round of applause for Lillian, who is our behind the scenes, as well as Wes, who kind of helped us with the run of show and making this go as smoothly as possible. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the folks behind the scenes. Feel free to engage in the conversation for Dive In on social media. The hashtag is DiveIn2020 and hashtag Global Inclusion. And with that said, this is the end of our presentation today, and thank you all for coming and participating as you did. Take care, be well, be safe.